Previously, we talked about a huge amount of muscle mass at the same time, designing these exercises so that they can involve the greatest amount of muscle mass possible. Along with that is an extremely closely related concept, and that is to operate the system of levers that are our skeletal components, the bones and the articulations, the joints, using the little motors that are the muscle mass, the muscles that operate those joints, over the longest effective range of motion that we can. The longest effective range of motion is an interesting concept because it is obviously necessary for the involvement of as much muscle mass as possible. These two concepts are extremely interrelated. The normal argument about this arises when we talk specifically about the ass to grass squat. Okay, we are not going to advocate an ass to grass squat, and it seems on first inspection that if we can go 8 inches below parallel, then we should. And the problem with going 8 inches below parallel is that it is not an effective range of motion below about a ½ inch below parallel for most people. Some isolated individuals can find an effective range of motion at 1 inch below parallel, but if you're going 8 inches below parallel to touch your glutes to your ankles, then you have relaxed a whole bunch of the muscular components of the kinetic chain that carried you down to the bottom in order to get that extreme amount of range of motion. And we're not here to relax. We are here to generate force. Strength is the production of force against an external resistance. It should be obvious to anybody thinking about this just for a second that it would be better to squat 405, 1 inch below parallel, than 315, 8 inches below parallel, because 405 is heavier and requires more force production. And if we're operating the same amount of muscle mass when we go 1 inch below parallel, as opposed to having to relax some of that muscle mass to get 8 inches below parallel, it becomes very obvious that the more conservative depth of 1 inch, ½ inch below parallel is much more effective in terms of criterion number one, muscle mass engaged in the production of force. So the range of motion is a tool that we use to ensure that criterion number one, the greatest amount of muscle mass involved in the exercise, actually gets accomplished. This is true for the press as well. When we stand, when we press, we don't relax our elbows and shoulders so that the bar drops down 3 inches below our chin. All of that same muscle mass is tight when the bar is either in contact with the meat of the deltoids or is floating in the air in our hands with the elbows in the correct position below the chin. And if you increase that range of motion down to the point where you're going 3 inches below the chin to get extra range of motion, you're going to radically affect the amount of weight you can lift using that same amount of muscle mass more effectively from a tight position. So the effectiveness of the range of motion is, we call it a second criteria, but it actually facilitates the first criterion, which is the greatest amount of muscle mass.